The knocking started just after midnight. It wasn't the polite kind of knock neighbors used when borrowing sugar or asking for help with a broken fence. It was frantic, desperate, the kind of pounding that makes your heart jump before your mind even wakes up. By the time I reached my front door, thunder was rolling across the sky, rain slamming against my farmhouse windows like handfuls of gravel. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing on my porch was Emily Carter, my neighbor's 24-year-old daughter, soaked to the bone, trembling, her blonde hair plastered to her face. She clutched an old leather folder against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. And then she looked me dead in the eyes and whispered the last thing I ever expected to hear. "I need a husband by Friday, and you're the only person I can ask." I stared at her like I had forgotten how words worked. She looked terrified, not embarrassed, not playful, terrified. And somehow, deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't some joke. Before we go any further, if you believe people deserve second chances, and that kindness can change someone's entire life, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone you love, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. I was 42 years old, widowed, and had spent the last 6 years hiding from life. My wife, Sarah, died in a car accident on a rainy road that looked a lot like the one outside my house that night. One moment she was driving home from visiting her mother. The next moment, a drunk driver crossed the line and ended everything. After her funeral, I became a ghost in my own life. I stopped going to town unless absolutely necessary. I ran my small farm alone. I fixed tractors, fed livestock, repaired fences, and spent most nights sitting on my porch staring at the empty chair Sarah used to sit in. The only people I ever spoke to regularly were my elderly neighbor Walter Carter and his daughter Emily. Walter had been my closest friend for years. He was the kind of man who never let you leave his property without homemade pie or life advice. Emily was different, bright, ambitious, restless. She had left our tiny town years ago for law school in Chicago. Everyone believed she'd become someone important, then 3 years later she returned. But she wasn't the same. She stopped smiling, stopped making eye contact, and no one knew why. Now she stood on my porch shaking. I pulled her inside and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. It took nearly 20 minutes before she finally spoke, and when she did, my entire world shifted. Her father was dying, stage 4 cancer. He had only days left. Walter had hidden the diagnosis from everyone because he didn't want pity. But there was one major problem. The Carter family owned over 600 acres of land that had been in their family for generations. And according to her grandfather's old will, the land could only pass to a legally married heir. If Emily wasn't married by Friday, the land would be transferred to a distant relative Walter despised, a wealthy cousin named Richard, who had spent years waiting for Walter to die so he could sell everything to developers. Emily had only discovered the will that evening. And Friday was 3 days away. She had begged her boyfriend in Chicago to help. He laughed and told her he wasn't ready for that level of commitment. Then he blocked her. She had no family left, no one she trusted, except me. I laughed at first because the entire thing sounded insane. Then I saw tears running down her face. This wasn't about money. This was about saving her father's legacy and honoring a dying man. She told me she would sign anything I wanted. She promised she would leave after everything was settled. She just needed someone decent enough not to destroy her life. Fine. That sentence broke me because she truly believed decent people were rare, and I knew exactly why. 2 years earlier, Emily had secretly been engaged to a powerful attorney in Chicago, a man everyone admired. Behind closed doors, he controlled everything she did, what she wore, who she talked to, where she went. When she tried leaving him after discovering his affairs, he beat her so badly she spent 3 nights in a hospital. His family buried the story. His connections protected him. And Emily fled back home with scars no one could see. That was why she trusted almost no one. That was why asking me had clearly been her last option. I looked at the woman standing in my kitchen, broken, exhausted, still fighting, and I said yes. The next morning, the entire town exploded with gossip. By noon, everyone knew Emily Carter was marrying her older widowed neighbor. People whispered in grocery stores, church parking lots, gas stations. They called me desperate, called her unstable, but none of it mattered. Walter cried when we told him. He grabbed my hand with trembling fingers and whispered that he could finally die peacefully. That nearly destroyed me. We were married Thursday afternoon in a courthouse 40 miles away. No wedding dress, no tuxedo, no flowers. Just two exhausted souls signing papers under fluorescent lights. But when Emily looked at me after the ceremony, there was something unexpected in her eyes. Relief. For the first time in years, she looked safe. Walter passed away peacefully Friday morning. Emily collapsed beside his bed. I held her while she screamed into my chest. For weeks after the funeral, she barely spoke. She wandered through her father's land like she was searching for pieces of him in the wind. I gave her space. Eventually, she moved into the guest room temporarily. At least that was the plan. Weeks became months, and then Richard returned. He claimed the marriage was fraudulent. He hired lawyers. He accused me of manipulating a grieving woman for land. Then things became terrifying. My barn was set on fire. My truck tires were slashed. Anonymous threats appeared in my mailbox. Emily blamed herself. She tried leaving. She said my life was being destroyed because of her, but I refused to let her carry that burden alone. We fought Richard in court, and that's when Emily transformed. The frightened woman who arrived at my door disappeared. The lawyer inside her came alive. She uncovered forged documents, hidden debts, evidence Richard had been trying to pressure Walter into changing the will for years. The courtroom became her battlefield, and she won. Richard lost everything, but victory came with a cost. During those months, Emily and I had become something neither of us expected. A real family. We cooked together, worked the farm together, laughed together, healed together, and that terrified her. One night she packed her bags. She left divorce papers on the kitchen table. She wrote that she loved me too much to ruin me with her trauma. I found the note at dawn, and for the first time since Sarah died, I felt my heart breaking all over again. I drove straight to the train station 2 towns over. I found Emily sitting alone with her suitcase, crying. And I told her something I had never admitted out loud. Sarah's death didn't just take my wife. It took my ability to imagine a future. Until the night she knocked on my door. Until she brought life back into a house filled with grief. Until she reminded me that surviving isn't the same as living. She cried harder than I had ever seen. And she finally admitted she wasn't leaving because she didn't love me. She was leaving because she did. She was afraid happiness would be taken away again. Just like before. Just like always. I got down on one knee in the middle of that station floor, not because I needed drama, but because this time I wanted to ask her the right way. I pulled out Sarah's old wedding ring that I had carried for years, and I told Emily that love after loss isn't betrayal. It's proof that the heart can survive impossible things. I asked her to marry me for real this time. Not for land, not for obligation, not for survival, for love. She said yes before I could even finish asking. We got married 6 months later under the giant oak tree on her father's land. The whole town came. Even people who once gossiped apologized. Emily started a legal foundation helping abused women escape dangerous relationships. I expanded the farm, and 2 years later, we welcomed twin daughters. We named one Sarah and one Grace, because Grace is what saved us both. If this story touched your heart, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in love after loss, and subscribe for more powerful stories. And before this story ends, comment below. Do you believe unexpected love can heal broken hearts? Sometimes the people who save your life don't arrive with grand promises. Sometimes they show up soaked in rain, knocking on your door asking for help. And without realizing it, they become your miracle. 5 years after our real wedding under the old oak tree, I thought life had finally stopped testing us. I was wrong. The morning everything changed started like any other peaceful day on the farm. The sun had barely risen over the Carter land, painting golden light across the fields Emily fought so hard to protect. Our twin daughters, Sarah and Grace, were now 4 years old and had somehow inherited every ounce of chaos possible into tiny human bodies. They chased chickens across the yard while Emily stood on the porch laughing so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. That laugh had become my favorite sound in the world. For years, I thought happiness was temporary, that if life gave you something beautiful, it would eventually take it back. But that morning felt different. It felt permanent. And maybe that's why what happened next hurt so much. Emily collapsed in the kitchen before breakfast. One second, she was reaching for pancake batter. The next second, her body hit the hardwood floor. I heard the crash from outside and ran inside so fast I nearly broke the screen door off its hinges. She was unconscious. The mixing bowl had shattered beside her. Our daughter stood frozen in tears. I rushed Emily to the hospital while my neighbor watched the girls. For 6 hours, doctors ran tests. For 6 hours, I sat in a waiting room reliving every loss I had ever survived. Then the doctor walked in with a face I recognized immediately. The face doctors wear when they're about to change your life forever. Emily had a rare heart condition. It had likely gone undetected for years. Stress had worsened it, and now she needed surgery immediately. Without it, she might not survive another year. I felt my entire body go numb. Emily had survived abuse. She had survived grief. She had rebuilt her life from ashes. And now this? When I walked into her hospital room, she smiled weakly and asked if I looked that pale because hospital coffee was terrible. That was Emily, always trying to protect everyone else from her own pain. The surgery was expensive. Even with insurance, the costs were crushing. And because farming had been hit hard that year by drought, we were already struggling. I quietly made the hardest decision of my life. I put part of the Carter land up for sale, the same land Emily fought to save. I never told her. But secrets don't stay buried. She found the paperwork 2 weeks before surgery. I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table crying with the documents spread in front of her. She looked heartbroken. Not because of the land, because she realized how scared I was. She told me that land represented her father. But I represented her future, and she would sell every acre if it meant watching our daughters grow up. That night, we held each other and cried harder than we had in years. Then something unexpected happened. The town showed up. Word spread about Emily's surgery. And suddenly, people we barely knew began helping. Farmers donated livestock feed. Local businesses held fundraisers. Church groups organized dinners. A little girl emptied her piggy bank and mailed us $14.22 with a note that said she wanted Emily to get better. Then something unbelievable happened. Richard returned. Yes, the same cousin who tried destroying us. He arrived looking older, sicker, broken. He admitted losing the court case had forced him to confront what kind of man he had become. Then he handed Emily a cashier's check large enough to cover her entire surgery. No strings attached, no legal tricks, just tears in his eyes and an apology years overdue. Emily forgave him. I honestly don't know if I could have done the same. Her surgery lasted 11 hours. The longest 11 hours of my life. I sat in that waiting room holding Sarah's old ring in one hand and Emily's wedding band in the other. I prayed harder than I ever had before. Finally, the surgeon walked out smiling. The surgery was successful. Emily would recover. I collapsed into tears right there on the hospital floor. Months later, Emily returned home weaker physically, but stronger in every other way. Recovery was slow. There were painful therapy sessions, sleepless nights, moments of fear, but our daughters became her greatest motivation. They made handmade cards. They brought flowers they picked from the yard. They climbed into bed beside her and promised to protect Mommy forever. Then came another surprise. Emily discovered Walter had left her something hidden in an old safety deposit box. Inside was a letter and a deed. Walter had secretly purchased another 300 acres decades earlier and placed it in Emily's name. In his letter, he wrote that he always knew life would test her. He just prayed she'd find someone strong enough to stand beside her. And he thanked me for becoming the son he never had. I couldn't finish reading it without crying.